During the time of Caliph Omar, there lived a musician whose beautiful voice had once filled the world with joy. In his youth, he had been a celebrated harpist. Whenever his fingers touched the strings, extraordinary images arose in the minds of those who heard him. His melodies made hearts feel as though they had grown wings, and the sweetness of his voice left every soul amazed. People gathered eagerly around him. His music brought life to their celebrations, and his singing filled their hearts with delight. Wherever he performed, people welcomed him, praised him, and paid him generously. For many years he lived through his art, his voice, his skill, and the strings of his harp provided him with everything he needed, but time gradually changed him. His body grew old and weak, his back became bent, his eyebrows drooped over his eyes, and his once powerful voice lost its sweetness. The voice that had once delighted countless listeners became rough and unpleasant. People no longer wished to hear it. The musician who had once been welcomed everywhere was now ignored. Those who had admired him in his youth turned away from him in his old age. The invitations stopped, and no one offered him money for his performances. At last, the old harpist became extremely poor. He had no money for food, and he could not even afford to replace the worn strings of his harp. One day, after nearly 70 years of life, he turned sincerely toward God. He said, "My Lord, you have granted me a long life. Although I have committed many faults, you have never withheld your generosity from me. For 70 years, you have provided for me and covered my shortcomings with your mercy. Today I have earned nothing. I have no bread and I have no money. Today I will become your guest. I will play my harp for you, and I will ask you to provide the price of its strings." The old musician picked up his harp and left the city. He walked to the graveyard of Medina, where no human audience was waiting for him. There, among the graves, he sat down and began to play for God. His voice was no longer beautiful, and his hands were no longer strong, but he played with complete sincerity. He was no longer performing for money, admiration, or applause. He offered his music directly to God. He played for a long time, and as he played, he wept. The sorrow within his heart flowed through the strings of his harp. He continued until exhaustion overcame him. Then he placed the harp beneath his head like a pillow, lay down among the graves, and fell into a deep sleep. As his body slept, his soul was freed from the burden of the physical world. It entered a vast spiritual realm in which there was no musician, no harp, and no need for hands or strings. His soul tasted a freedom beyond age, hunger, poverty, and earthly limitation. It longed to remain in that place forever, but the time for its final departure had not yet arrived. The old man still had another stage of his journey to complete. At that same time, Caliph Omar was suddenly overcome by an unusual drowsiness. This surprised him because he was not accustomed to sleeping during the day. He understood that such an unexpected sleep must have a hidden purpose. He lay down and immediately fell asleep. While he slept, a divine voice addressed him. "Omar, one of my chosen and honored servants is sleeping in the graveyard. Go to the public treasury, take 700 dinars and carry them to him. Tell him that this money has been sent for his needs and for the strings of his harp. When he has spent it, let him return to you, and more will be given to him. Today he is our guest." Omar awoke at once. The words of the dream remained clear in his mind. Without delay, he went to the public treasury, took 700 dinars, placed them inside a purse, and carried the money to the graveyard. When he arrived, he began searching among the graves for the servant mentioned in his dream. He looked carefully in every direction, expecting to find a saint or some noble and respected servant of God. But he saw no one except an old harpist sleeping on the ground with a worn instrument beneath his head. Omar looked at the sleeping musician and wondered whether this could truly be the person he had been commanded to find. The divine voice had spoken of a chosen and honored servant, yet the only person before him was an old musician dressed in poverty. Omar searched the graveyard again. He walked around the graves and looked carefully for someone else, but he found no other person. He returned to the sleeping harpist, then searched once more. Still, there was no one else. At last, Omar understood that the old musician was indeed the servant God had described. The man's true spiritual condition was hidden beneath his outward appearance. Although people saw only a poor and forgotten harpist, God had called him a chosen servant and an honored guest. Omar approached the old man and sat respectfully beside him. He did not wake him immediately. He waited quietly because he did not wish to disturb his sleep. Then Omar sneezed. At the sound, the old harpist suddenly awoke. He opened his eyes and saw the caliph sitting beside him. Terror immediately filled his heart. He believed Omar had come to punish him. He looked at his harp and thought that he had been discovered committing an offense. His body began to tremble, and in his fear, he called upon God for protection. Omar saw his terror and spoke gently. "Do not be afraid. I have not come to punish you. I have brought you good news from God." The old harpist stared at him in astonishment. Omar continued, "God sends his greetings to you. He has asked how you are enduring your immeasurable pain. He has sent you this money for the strings of your harp and for your other needs." Omar placed the purse of 700 dinars before him. "When you have spent this money, come to me again. God has commanded that more should be given to you." The old man looked at the purse. He had asked God only for enough money to replace the strings of his harp. Now 700 dinars lay before him, brought by the caliph himself in answer to his prayer. The old musician was overwhelmed by this unexpected mercy. He began to tremble and weep. He bit his hand in astonishment and cried, "O Lord without equal, your generosity has filled me with shame." The kindness shown to him awakened a deep regret within his heart. He remembered the many years he had spent absorbed in music. He remembered the time he had devoted to melodies, rhythms, performances, and the praise of human audiences. Then he seized his harp. Looking at the instrument that had accompanied him throughout his life, he cried, "You have kept me away from God. For 70 years, you have stood between me and my Lord. Through you, I became occupied with music and forgot the pain of separation." In his grief, the old man struck the harp against the ground and broke it. He began to mourn over his life. He lamented the years he believed he had wasted in following his art. He remembered how completely he had immersed himself in the sounds of the harp, and how those sounds had prevented him from hearing the deeper cry within his own soul. He turned toward God and begged for forgiveness. His heart became filled with sorrow, and he repented of every breath he believed had passed without true awareness. He wept bitterly over his past and asked God to release him from the burden of what he had done. Omar listened to him carefully. Then he spoke. He said, "This weeping and repentance of yours show that you are still in a state of sobriety. You continue to look backward at your past. You remember what you did, count the years you believe you wasted, and remain occupied with your former actions. Your attention to the past is itself another veil." The harpist became silent. Omar continued, "Repentance concerns what has already passed. You still speak about your life, your actions, your failures, and your regret. You were once occupied with your music. Now you are occupied with your repentance. In both conditions, you remain occupied with yourself." The old musician listened. Before, he had thought about his talent, his performances, and the praise he received. Now he thought about his guilt, his failures, and the years he believed he had lost. Pride and regret appeared to be opposites, but both kept his attention fixed upon himself. Omar urged him to pass beyond both. His words entered the harpist's heart. A profound change came over the old man. He was released from his attachment to his former music, and then he was released from his attachment to his regret for that music. The old musician entered a state of spiritual bewilderment. His search passed beyond ordinary searching, and words could no longer describe what took place within him. Knowledge and speech could follow him no farther. The harpist, who had once been lost in the sound of his instrument, was now freed even from the sound of his repentance. He passed beyond his memories, beyond his shame, and beyond the image he had carried of himself. He had gone to the graveyard asking God for enough money to replace the strings of his harp. There, God answered his prayer and revealed a mercy far greater than anything the old man had expected. The world had heard only the weakness of his aging voice, but God had heard the sincerity within it. People had abandoned him when his music lost its beauty. But when he played without an audience and without hope of any human reward, his offering was accepted. The old harpist had believed that he was alone among the graves, yet his prayer reached the unseen, caused Omar to fall asleep, opened the public treasury, and brought the caliph himself to the place where he lay. What began as a request for the price of a few harp strings became the final transformation of the old musician's life. What began with the sound of a forgotten harpist ended in a silence beyond music, repentance, knowledge, and words.